All right, we're live.
All right, let's do it.
Oh my gosh. So this week on the podcast, I have my mom, Julie Blackley. And I think when I first told you that I was doing a podcast, the first thing you said was, I'll be on. And in the back of my mind, I was like, I don't know. A little nervous.
Because you didn't want me to outshine you.
Yeah, that is definitely why. It was like, this is soon going to just become your podcast, and all one viewer is going to say, no, bring her back. So, but no, I am excited to have you on here, mostly because it'll be interesting to talk books with you, considering that the entire time that I've ever really known you, I've never read. Ever.
29 years, to be exact.
Of never reading.
Exactly.
Ever. Even though Adam and I talked about this on one of the episodes, you do claim that we read in when we were homeschooled.
I know Adam did. I witnessed tears from him crying in 2 books.
Which books?
A Single Shard. 100%. I woke up.
I have no idea what that book is.
And he was in the living room upstairs on my red chair, and he was choked up reading the end of the book.
Okay.
And Shadow of the Bull was another one.
Also, I have no idea. The only book that I can remember reading outside of Harry Potter pre this podcast. Well, actually, I take that back. I started reading a couple books before this podcast just to make sure that I still knew how to read, to be honest. But the only other book that I remember reading before this podcast was Shackleton. That's the only book that's ever stuck with me.
Well, and that we read as a family.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even read it myself.
Well, what about Uncle Tom's Cabin? We read a lot.
Did I ever read that book?
We read it, yes, as a group. You know, you, Leanne, and I.
And we would just...
And didn't you read the Aragon series?
I read the first one, and then I think I read half of the second one, and it's like, just throw that one away.
Yeah.
That was it. I know Aunt Tawny always tried to get me to read, too, because Garrett loved reading, and every time I would go live with him, she was like, read these spy novels, and I can't even remember what they made a movie over one of them, and I was like...
Drums, Girls, and Dangerous Pie.
I did read that one.
You did.
When I think that was my first summer going to Utah, so I would have been... 13.
Yes. And I went to the Utah Library with Tawny to pick up that book. In fact, I picked up several books before I got on the plane to go home because I had high hopes that she would be able to convince you to read.
Did not.
That one and Al Capone Does My Shirts. I believe you did read that one too.
I did read that one.
I think you read more than you think you did when you were homeschooled, honestly. After that... You were a complete and total disaster with the reading. I believe every confession that you make that you never read in high school or college.
No.
It broke my heart. What I want to know is, I know at the beginning of the podcast, you said that part of the reason that you did this was because your beautiful, literate wife didn't think you could actually read a book a week.
Yeah.
But, I mean, unless you're a lot like your sister and it just takes some stupid saying like that to get you to do something, was there some sort of desire to actually understand what all the hype was? Or
I don't think it was so much hype as much as...
relationships or just... No, it was just kind of shallow.
No, I mean, I definitely wanted to prove her wrong. I wanted to be able to read a book a week and know that I could do that. The other thing was I listen to a lot of podcasts, and a lot of the people that I listen to also read books. And so then I was like, well, if Joe Rogan can read books, I gotta be at least as smart as that dude, right? I mean, he got punched in the face for a long time. So I was like, all right, if he can read books and he's busy, I can read books. And so that was really where I started off. So I started off with The Terminal List, which was books by Jack Carr, who he had on his podcast.
I read one of those based on your recommendations.
Great books.
It was good. It was something for me, but it was
awesome.
good.
And then so from there, I was like, you know what? So then it started growing from there. So I actually did like reading before I started the podcast. I just didn't know if I could stick with it because it's a commitment. Like it takes a long time. Like you know that because you have yet to read the books that I have asked you to read because we wanted to do 2 episodes and you still haven't finished the second one.
I will get it done. I will.
It just takes time. And so it was hard for me to like prioritize that at first, but I think I found a groove now where I can actually still read a book a week. Mm-hmm. Also, I read somewhere that I think it's Bill Gates reads a book a week. And he said he credited a lot of his success in life to that, just being able to, consistently learn and grow. And I was like, well, he's decently successful, so I might as well copy that. And like every entrepreneur reads, I was like, well, if I'm going to actually give this a go and everything, I might as well read like the successful ones do.
Well, and I mean, there are great men who have said that we take with us what we learn here on earth.
Yeah.
And what we learn from books, we will take with us. There's so many things we won't take with us, but knowledge we will. And so,
yeah.
And not just Bill Gates, but I guarantee most successful people are very well read.
Very well read, yeah. But he explicitly said 1 book a week. Like he aims for 52 books a year, and he publishes his list. I've even looked at it. So he publishes his list of what he reads every single year. It's 52 books. He reads a book a week. It's pretty good. So
I get that now you've gotten into the rhythm of a book a week. You're going to be able to hit that 52 Bill Gates goal.
It'll be way more than 52. I'm reading I think 11 books this month.
Wow, that's a lot.
And last month I read 1 extra. The month before that I read 2 extra. So, I mean, it comes and goes because I'm doing a book a week plus on like holidays and things like that. I'm trying to do special episodes. So like for Halloween this month, I'm trying to do a Stephen King day. So I'm reading 6 Stephen King books on top of my weekly schedule. So that actually comes out on Tuesday. And then I still have an episode on Wednesday for that book week. So It's just an extra one.
So I think that's awesome. I really do. It's been hard for me to kind of get into a rhythm. I set yearly goals of how many books I want, and it's hard for me to kind of marry that with my goal in my life. And so you've already accomplished a lot. But what I really want to know, aside from the number, is how has it changed you, the reading that you have done? Not just that now you're disciplined to read that many. How has the content that you've read and the experiences that you've had within the books changed you?
I mean, I definitely have an appreciation for literature now. I think there were a couple books specifically that did that for me. The Book Thief was amazing. That book was amazing. Before the podcast, reading a couple books. The
Kite Runner.
The Kite Runner. Really every book that I've made a little poster of. The Kite Runner, To Kill a Mockingbird, 1984, and Frankenstein all really kind of cemented the fact that there are phenomenal stories that can be told really better through the written word. But I don't know that I've been changed yet. I don't know. I think that's all part of the process. I don't see a 180-degree flip where all of a sudden I'm like, I don't like The Office anymore. I'd rather read.
Well, I don't mean like that. You'll always, I still love all forms of entertainment, but has it made the world smaller? Has it made you more empathetic? Are you able or more interested in people, I should say, and hearing their stories, just understanding stories a little bit more?
Yeah, I definitely think it's made me a little bit more interested in people. Maybe a little bit more empathetic for sure. Yeah, I just think I have a more well-rounded worldview so far. Very understanding of other people's perspectives, which I think is good. But I would say I don't think I'm completely reformed yet. I don't know. We'll see. We'll get there one day.
Well, there's really good TV shows and movies out there too.
I know.
So just
there's
merit in most things.
Arrested Development.
Ted Lasso.
Yeah, Ted Lasso. So this week's book, though, is Running with Sherman. And it's actually going to be a little bit out of order because I actually think this episode's going to come out in November. And the one that we're recording next is going to come out in next week. So it's going to be a little bit weird because we're going to have talked and then we're probably not going to have the same conversation on the next one. But that's okay because nobody listens at this point anyway. So we're still just growing at this point. But this week's book is Running with Sherman. And what did you think of the book?
Well, I chose this book.
Yep.
And it was not a book that was on my radar. In fact, I really had never heard of it before. And I don't think I would have picked it up because I love to run. And I think that it would have seemed a little bit gimmicky to me, maybe, not knowing anything about what the content was in the book. But it was a non-runner, someone, if you can believe it, about 10 years older than I am, recommended it to me, Bonnie Victors.
Okay.
And they read it in their book club. Mm-hmm. And these are women that range from, 45 to 75. And Bonnie loved it. And to hear her enthusiasm about the book, outside of it being a running book, piqued my interest.
Okay.
Not to mention that I've always been a little interested in getting a donkey. So it seemed like, well, maybe I should read this book.
Do you read a lot of running books, or have you read a lot of running books? Like, have you read his other book? His other book is Born to Run.
Mm-hmm. And I did not love it. I think that it made me, I read running books to obviously be inspired just by the work ethic that runners have.
So you have read other ones?
Oh, yeah. Born to Run was so out of my stratosphere that it was, even though I was reading books about other Olympians, that is also so out of my stratosphere. For some reason, Born to Run seemed just impossible. It's about ultra running and all of that. And I did enjoy definitely parts of it. So I wasn't drawn to this athlete or this author when Running with Sherman came along. Mm-hmm. But
you liked it?
I did. I liked it for multiple reasons. And running was at the bottom of my list.
Yeah. I hate running. Like, with every fiber of my being, I hate running. I don't think I've ever liked running. And
I'm hoping that this conversation, with how many years I've tried to convince you to run, is going to circle back like the reading. So like 30 years, you're going to be like, well, somebody said I couldn't run a marathon, so I'm going to run it, and I'm just going to run one every year just because I don't know, Bill Gates or some other famous person does it. And so that's what I'm hoping. But go ahead and say no, because I've heard it before.
No, that will never, ever happen. I don't think I've ran since stopping speed skating. I don't think I've I've gone even for a jog. And I don't know that I want to again. It is the worst. It hurts my knees, it hurts my feet, it hurts my hips, it hurts my shins. I get shin splints real bad, and it just sucks the whole time. Like, he talks about running, and I'm like, ugh, none of that sounds fun. However, I did enjoy parts of the book that talked about animals, and then there were a couple other training spots that I took notes on that I liked, but I just, for the most part, couldn't get over the fact that he was running. Like, I was just like, hey, can't relate to this at all. Like, running is just the absolute worst.
And so to me, this book is not even about running. It's a book about healing. It's a book about relationships. It's a book about setting impossible goals and just going for it.
Yeah.
I watched an interview with him about this book just today to kind of get ready for this podcast. And the interviewee asked, how did this book come about? And he said for his book in the past, mainly Born to Run, and he's also a journalist, so he does a lot of writing and stories and things like that, that he's always started with a plan and moved forward. So investigated a story that he was interested in and then participated in it a lot of times and wrote about it. Mm-hmm. With running with Sherman, the story was unfolding. He had no intention for any of this to ever happen. It was never on his radar. But as the story was unfolding, he thought, this is something I want to write about and remember this experience. Mm. So I think that kind of changes it. He didn't set out to have this experience, but it happened to him for a number of reasons that I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yeah. So for those of you who haven't read the book, the Running with Sherman is about a guy who likes to run, obviously, and
ultra marathon.
Run ultra marathons and all sorts of crazy things. And he adopts a
donkey.
That's what I was going for. He adopts a donkey that's been basically abused and can barely walk and has been just living in a cramped pen for who knows how long. And he nurtures this donkey back to health and then enters into a donkey race, which I didn't even know that was a thing, but a race with the donkey where you have to run with the donkey and hold on to the donkey the entire time. Otherwise, you're disqualified. And it's like a 20-something mile race. It's like almost 30 miles. And I think it's like 1,500 feet of elevation, roughly. Might have been like 13 or something like that. But it's quite a bit ways up, plus, pretty far distance. But the entire time, it's you and the donkey, not just you and not just the donkey. So,
and you're roped to the donkey.
Yes. And if you let go of the rope, you have to go back to the spot that you let go of the rope from and restart. You can't, like if your donkey runs away, you have to go catch your donkey, go back to where you let go of him, and keep going.
So I want to just kind of clarify, or not even clarify, but maybe expound on what you said. The donkey that he got, this rescue donkey, was in the garage or in the corral of a hoarder that he never even saw daylight. So he literally lived for years in a pen, just with his wastes that he's living on, and never was cared for, groomed for, barely ate. And his 9-year-old daughter asked for a donkey for her birthday. I don't know if this was in the book.
Yeah.
Okay. But asked for a donkey for her birthday. And he was like, oh, we got this far. Maybe we'll get a donkey. And he had a friend of his had mentioned, you have all this land. He kind of worked for a church or something. And
he lived with the Amish people.
Okay. So one of those people wanted to get this donkey out of this situation. And so he took this donkey. Mm-hmm. And he knew that the donkey needed a lot of help. And so he called one of this guy's friends. Actually, not true. It was a woman that he saw riding a donkey in town. And he asked that man, the friend, who was the lady on the donkey. And he gave him that name. And then the friend called. So it was like some random woman he saw on a trail with a donkey. And she came to to look at Sherman. What she told him is how this whole thing started. He didn't get the donkey to think, oh, I'm going to do this burro race. That's what it's called. It's based on the sourdough and all the mining and things like that from forever ago. He got it for his daughter. But when this woman looked at Sherman, she said, I'm not going to help you rehabilitate this donkey, and you think that it's going to be some beautiful donkey that's going to live happily in your pasture, because that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
This donkey is mentally, physically and emotionally checked out.
Yeah.
So she said, you have to put this donkey to work or give this donkey a job. That's what she said precisely. And he was kind of had a no crap moment. Like, I've only owned the donkey for one day. And how do I know what I'm going to give this donkey to do?
Yeah.
So that's kind of, then his mind started thinking. So go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, that's the gist of the story. So, but I felt like, as far as from like a book's perspective, it was a little bit hard to follow all that. So like, as you're talking about that, I kind of remember bits and pieces of that. But from a book's perspective, I feel like the author jumps around quite a bit. So like that story right there would have been a great like 4 or 5 chapters at the very beginning. But instead, it starts off with like him talking about other animals he owns, like goats and things like that, and all their names. Then it jumps to him in like, I think Angola or something like that, being a war correspondent. Then back to him like moving to Pennsylvania, and then up forward to like cutting the donkey's nails, and then back to like buying the donkey, and then it just jumps back and forth, and it's the timeline of the first couple chapters were really hard for me to grasp.
I would agree. When I read the book, I did kind of wonder, does this guy have ADD? And I couldn't really remember Born to Run too much, except that I wasn't in love with it like everyone else was. So in my mind, I was wondering, did he jump around in that book too? Like I couldn't remember, but I did feel like it was a little bit choppy.
Yeah.
To give some insight on that, after I've seen this interview with him, he said that the whole process of giving Sherman the job was kind of a 10-year process. And it wasn't 10 years with Sherman. He only had Sherman about 9 months from the time he bought Sherman for his daughter and they ran the burro race. But it was a 10-year process of coincidences where everything seemed to fall in place, and all the moving pieces that he needed to make those 9 months happen were in place.
Yeah.
Had he said that in the book, it would have made it so much easier to understand the choppiness.
Yeah.
But I can see that now because, again, he kind of explained how he even knew about the burro race. He didn't know about the burro race. He had heard about it 10 years ago and never even thought about it as anything. He thought it was insanity, But then all these other moving pieces happened. And then when she said, give him a job, it all kind of click in his mind.
Gotcha.
And he could have a goal.
Because reading the book, it was like him trying to tell parts of his life story mixed in with the story of the burro race. And I was like, why don't you just tell the burro race, dude? Like, I don't need to know all this backstory. All you have to tell me is you own a farm next to some Amish people. But it was like so much more information. I felt like it felt disconnected from the story. But I guess that does make sense.
Yeah. The other thing that I want to say, because I also, like I said, agreed with you on that, but I didn't want to spoil it for you until you finished the book. I felt, aside from the interview, this is completely different, but my experience with the book was I felt like there was closure in that chaos at the end of the book. Because at the end of the book, there's a huge, I don't know if the word is revelation. I don't know what the word would be, but there's understanding that this experience was so much more than the burro race, because so many different people's lives were changed and affected by it. And so a lot of his tangents were, even though I think he could have absolutely structured his book differently, but I think a lot of his tangents were because he got to that last chapter obviously, before we did. And so he wanted us to know, the different people in the book's backstories, which to me was very choppy. Like, did I really need to know all about Tanya's life? I didn't think I did. Or did I really need to know, mad respect for Zeke, but did I really need to know all of that? Because this is the story about just the burro race. But at the end of the book, I do need to know all that. And did I really need to? Do you see what I'm saying? The truck driver, because he knows he couldn't have done it without them.
I think those people's stories were actually really interesting. That was the part of the book that I think I really enjoyed. The parts that I didn't really enjoy was where he talks about other random people that he doesn't even ever meet. He does that quite a bit. He talks about like this girl who was like a 14-year-old burro racer who was really good. And he talks about her for a while. And then it's like, she has a ponytail, and I saw her walk into a car. And
Yeah,
I was like,
that. I think he wanted to give like high props to the people who were good at burro racing. Like, who knows what burro racing is? Nobody. And this may have been his one chance to kind of like give them some reverence for their hard work and what they've accomplished on a national or level. I am agreeing with you. I'm just saying there were some
people's story though that I agree
backstory for
would like made that more influential. Like, I really did like Zeke's story. And I think that's the part of the book that I really did enjoy, was kind of seeing how animals and human, kind of that interaction really do help people. But there were just, I felt like, I don't know, I guess I'm getting nitpicky with this book because
I picked
it's
it.
not, yeah, no.
He rarely likes what his mother picks.
Whatever. No, it wasn't my favorite book. There were parts of it again, and I want to go over some of the things that I did like. But I felt like, one, again, there were people that were introduced in the book that I feel like didn't have to be. And I could have focused, I guess, more on the truck drivers, more on Zeke, more on Tanya.
Or the burro race. I felt like that was very underdeveloped, the actual race.
That's my next thing. I also felt like the end was so underwhelming.
Yeah.
Because if I had to read another chapter about how they went out and trained, and then the donkey stopped and he ran into the donkey and then decided to turn around when the donkey stopped and come back. If I had to read another time of him doing that again and again and again and again, it would have been awful. Meanwhile, he skims through the actual race in a matter of like, I don't know pages because I listened to it, but the actual race, I remember thinking like, when is the race going to start? There's only 25 minutes left of this book. And it literally is the last 20 minutes maybe of this 12-hour book are the race.
I think the reason for that, as with anything, you speed skated.
Yeah.
I do run. The first time I ran a half marathon, I was extremely emotional at the starting line.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because of, the 2 hours that I was about to run meant so much to me. It was the 6 months that I spent preparing for something that I never thought I could do. And so I think, I think that would probably be the same for you. You gained more from all of the practices that you did in speed skating than you did the actual event. And so what changed him, or what made this a grand experience in his mind, wasn't the burro race. It was the relationships that he made with the donkeys, with the goat, with these people that had completely random backgrounds that he didn't even know before this experience. And they came together and they did this thing. They did it. And so the going out and coming back and the going out and trying to figure it out, to him, when they actually got him to cross the river, or got Sherman to get out of the gate, those were the big successes.
Yeah.
It didn't even matter about the race.
I can see that from his perspective, but from a book's perspective, it was pretty boring. That's what I will say. I get that from its perspective because I agree that all of the laps that I skated in speed skating, training wise, mean more to me than the actual races. It also might have to do with the fact that I never won any races. And he didn't win the burro race. So obviously, had he come in first at the burro race, he probably would have talked about all the people that he passed, him looking at the finish line thinking, holy crap, we can actually win this thing. But he got like 28th, 29th, and 30th place or something like that.
Just still as impressive as heck.
I get it.
Yeah.
But I mean, it would probably mean more to him if they got first, second, and third.
Same as they were going for that. But.
Same as if like I had gotten first, second, or third in the speed skating. So obviously the laps I think mean more to me, but I think it just makes for a more from a bystander's perspective, just like you're building this up, and I just felt like it was anticlimactic.
I agree. I think that I could see why he did it again, but I do agree that for amateurs that will never attend a burro race and have that adrenaline rush, it would have been nice to be a part of that adrenaline rush and that race and to let it play out in the book for all the hard work we did. Because it seemed like we were in training and then it was done. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I get it, but I can see
right.
why he did it that
I can
way,
see.
but-
I definitely see how it meant more. All of that meant more to him. And just from a bystander's perspective, I'm like, I don't know, dude. That was not my favorite part. But there were things that I did like about the book for sure. So it wasn't a complete just, hey, don't read this. I think the parts that I liked most about the book were actually the educational aspects of the book, not so much the story, to be honest. I think he did a very good job midway through the book of providing some, scientific background, some, information about both animals and training that I actually found really, really interesting. But
tell me, because I read it quite a while ago.
So the parts that I really, really liked were the parts that he talked about the importance of animal-human relationships. So once he kind of starts diving into this new life that he has, because he was born and raised in Philly, I think. I don't know about born, but he was raised in Philadelphia. He was like a basketball player, lived in the big city. Then he moves off into this town in Pennsylvania that's kind of more of like, not more of, it is an Amish community. Like it is, he lives around the Amish people and he starts to see the health benefits of the Amish people. And there actually are some scientific, like I've listened to a lot of podcasts where people talk about how like Amish people are weirdly healthier, even though they don't have a lot of things. I also thought it was very interesting. I just think Amish people in general are very interesting people. Like I would actually really enjoy, I think, reading a book because some of the little nuances of things I think are just really funny. Like he mentions that they can't own cars or drive cars, but they can like Uber. And not Uber specifically, but you can just go into town and be like, hey, can you drive me somewhere? And it's just like one of those weird like loopholes that and like
their 16th year or 15th year. That one's weird.
Where you just can go crazy. I've known about that one for a while.
I didn't.
You didn't? Mm-hmm. What's interesting to me is how high of a percentage actually still come back and just stay Amish. So it's like 90 to 95%. And from everything I've read that's true, that most people after taking their year of going crazy, going to see movies, doing drugs, whatever it is that you do, your party here, 95% of people still come back and decide that the Amish life is the way that they want to live.
Yeah. Peace, family, friends, everything you've known.
Yeah. I honestly think a lot of it has to do with the animals, actually. Yeah. Like I do think that animal relationship is very important. And one of the things that he really dives into is like the history of that, which I thought was really interesting. So he goes back to basically the dawn of time where like man and wolves became friends and it became dogs. And I thought that was really, really interesting. One of the things that he mentioned, which I don't know, it was a weird perspective on things, but he actually said that dogs trained humans instead of humans training dogs. I had never really thought about that. That's a weird idea, to be honest. I wanted to kind of get your input on that. Did you remember that part where he said dog trains humans?
I don't remember that, but I do.
He basically says that dogs have like a sixth sense for emotions, which they definitely do. Like they can feel fear, they can feel, happiness. I think that's why your dogs kind of react so well to you. And so they basically said that there was no way that humans could have domesticated dogs because there was no way for humans to go, or domesticated wolves because there was no way for humans to know the reactions of wolves. But on the flip side, like wolves would have known when humans were okay with them coming closer and closer and closer. So the wolves would have come in and basically come a little bit closer, come a little bit closer, come a little bit closer until they felt like that fear had spiked, and then leave and then come closer until that fear had spiked, and basically domesticated the humans into that relationship originally.
I
because
thought you were
of
going
that.
to say eat them. Wolves are not nice.
No. But like, because they could have, come closer until they eventually met. And then, but humans would never have known kind of how the wolves were feeling. The wolves could have known how humans were feeling to that point where that relationship started.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. So I thought that was a really interesting point. Whether that's true or not, no one will ever know. But I mean, just the entire then relationship that he built the entire relationship that then builds from humans on forward with basically every animal on Earth. So, I mean, he goes through and talks about, the domestication of horses, cows, pigs, parts of the world, it's elephants, there's tigers. I mean, there's this entire relationship with animals that has grown over the years. And then he says that, with the invention of electricity and cars, we basically stopped that relationship for most people. We locked all animals outside and locked ourselves inside. And he talks about how kind of through like the evolution of humans, how we've kind of evolved to need animals. So that relationship started, and then we've evolved emotionally to be dependent on animals, and how like that separation has triggered quite a bit of like emotional, I guess, I don't know if it's like emotional, it's not abuse, but like emotional trauma for humans, because we became so dependent on animals that we've then cut that out of our lives.
Well, I do think there's a special relationship between animals and humans, and I'm just going to focus on dogs right now because that's what I personally have my own experience with. But I think that animals allow us to love more freely and forgive more freely and to feel loved regardless of what the situation is, what kind of day we're having, what we've done. Unconditional love, that's what I'm looking for. And I do think it's a very powerful relationship. And some people have those relationships with horses or farm animals, just depending on what you're around. But I think that's why service dogs are so important.
He talks a lot about service dogs.
Yeah,
too.
to just mankind. I mean, you look at people who are really struggling in life, and I'm sure most of them have a pretty supportive family system or friend system or healthcare system. But it's the service animals that are truly helping them function. So I definitely think that. I also think that just our innate love of animals is very different than, I don't know, I don't even know if it's more or less, but for some reason, and riddle me the answer to this, I can watch or read what's the book you made me read with all the killing?
The Terminal List.
The Terminal List. I can read The Terminal List or watch Jack Ryan or all these other crazy, how many countless people die in really horrific ways. But if a dog or an animal is like kicked in a movie, I am like literally in tears. And I can't get it out of my head. And I will never go near that movie again. I will spoil it for anybody to save them from the heartache that is in that clip.
I think that's why John Wick does so well. Do you know what John Wick is?
No.
You've never seen John Wick?
No. Should we watch that? But I got to get through my...
No, I don't know that you'd like John Wick. John Wick's a shoot 'em up movie. It's like it's Keanu Reeves killing a ton of people. Like that's all it is.
I like Keanu Reeves.
Yeah. So the premise of the movie, and I think this is why it does so well, and I think it plays on that kind of innate love for dogs, and it actually is a really good contrast because I mean, I think in the latest John Wick, because there's 4 of them, and I think in the latest one, I heard that he kills like over 300 people. Like it's insane.
In one movie.
In one movie. Like it's crazy. But the entire...
use his guts to kill him.
No. The entire premise of the movie though is, so his wife has cancer and she's dying and she gives her husband a dog as like you need to make sure that you love something still because I'm not going to be around forever. And he's like this I keep wanting to say mercenary, but like hitman, like he's like a crazy assassin dude. And somebody tries to steal his car and he stops them from stealing his car. So they come back to his house later that night and they kill his dog in front of him.
Do they show that in the movie?
Yeah.
They show...
Well, I mean, he just shoots the dog and you see it.
And you hear the dog
Yeah,
cry.
the dog, yep. So they kill the dog. And then for 4 movies, he just kills people because they killed his dog. Like literally. And the entire time you're like... You
don't care about those
people.
people.
You're like, it's totally justified. Like, I hope he gets to those people and murders them because you killed that dog.
Yeah.
And so like they're really... It's like an extreme example. But literally those movies are some of the most successful movies that have come out in the last probably 10 years. I know that John Wick 4, did amazing. And all of the John Wicks have done phenomenal. And the premise is like you want revenge for a puppy. Like that's the whole premise. But so, side note, but really funny. But I was kind of thinking about like why that is. And he kind of goes into a couple different reasons as to like why we might feel like that. And I was thinking kind of one of the reasons that he brings up that I think I really agree with is that we've kind of had a dependence on animals our whole lives. Or not our whole lives, but our whole existence as humans. And I think back to, like how quickly our brains can become rewired for things. Like how crazy are kids nowadays with cell phones? You know what I mean? Like, or even like little kids, like, 10-year-olds and stuff that can figure out more on a cell phone than even I can. And I'm a millennial who has had a cell phone a really long time, but their brains have just become rewired for technology. And I feel like that's even happened in the last 15 years, right? Yeah. Would you agree?
I would agree, yes.
That like our brains are constantly changing and adapting to our situations. And technology is just one good example. People as old as you are, who were born before the invention of electricity can barely deal with electronics. And even in that short amount of time between you and your grandkids, like the rewiring of the human brain has a very significant implication in just your day-to-day life.
Right.
Now imagine that amount of rewiring going on for the last 100,000 years. So the last 100,000 years, humans have been constantly dealing with animals. It has everything to do with your entire life. Like at first it was, kill or be killed. Like there are animals out there, there are bears, there are, wolves, there are everything that will kill you. And so your entire life is kind of structured around understanding those animals to survive. And then it moves into kind of like that friendship with animals. And then it again moves back into animals to survive. Animals were used constantly for farming, for food, for transportation. And so our human minds, I think, are very wired to animals. Like there's a very like actual connection that has been built up over years and years and years and years and years that really does exist. And to just kind of ignore that, I think is what leads to people, or maybe not leads to depression, but I think kind of going back to that, I think, leads to happiness. I think, you know what I mean? Like, I think you can probably get around without being around animals and not being depressed. But there is, significant scientific data saying that, depressed people who go back to their roots and go back to animals, whether that's service dogs, whether that's time spent riding horses, whether that's just being on a farm, that really does kind of rewire your brain to think the way it's supposed to and to feel the way it's supposed to, receive dopamine and happiness the way it's supposed to, the way that our brains have evolved over the last 10,000 years of just constantly being involved with animals.
Mm-hmm. I agree completely. Our neighbor has horses, and they are therapy horses. And so,
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have random people come in and?
They do. Yep. And they just come, and some of them ride the horses, some of them just groom the horses, but they have a very steady clientele of different people coming in to just be around horses. So these are people that, can't own horses themselves or animals themselves, but they recognize the peace that comes from having that interaction with an animal, in this case, a horse. There's no denying that animals, I think there's no denying, change you and make you.
And that was the best part about the story. The best part about the story, in my opinion, was Zeke. And 100%. I thought that was the coolest part about the whole story. I think that was even cooler than his experience with Sherman, like the impact that Sherman had on Zeke, a kid who was struggling with depression, had just tried to commit suicide, was, home from school, trying to gather his emotions together. And then his relationship with Sherman, I think, was probably the coolest part of the story for me.
Well, and I think that you're seeing one side of it, which I absolutely agree. But before Zeke got there, Sherman was much more difficult to manage. I mean, they had gotten the other 2 donkeys and they had the goat that went with him, but he was still very reluctant to do it. But when Zeke got there, and this is from the interview, and I know it was in the book, the first day when Zeke got there, he said, after we were done running, Zeke is standing there. And he said, I looked over and Sherman is kind of leaning his hip on Zeke. Still in contact with him. And he said from that day forward, Sherman and Zeke were bonded. Zeke was healing Sherman. It wasn't, I can't even remember the guy who wrote the book, but it wasn't him.
Yeah.
He bought him and obviously literally saved him, but his emotional connection was with Zeke, and he was healing Zeke.
Yeah.
So, I think that's cool. I think even you and Jim.
Yeah. No, I was thinking me and Jim, but I've always been
Jim is his dog, by the way.
Oh, Jim's been on the podcast.
He has?
He walks.
Okay.
He walks around every once in a while.
Okay.
Jim is the greatest dog on the face of the planet. The greatest dog that's ever lived. He's the greatest. But I've always been a dog person. I loved Rupert growing up. I loved Nesquik. I've always known that I wanted dogs. From the moment that Olivia and I got married, I was like, I just want dogs. I want dogs. What's been very interesting for me is to see it help Olivia. So, because Olivia, I don't think was not an animal person at all, was not a dog person. When we first got married, she said we could have a dog, but it has to stay outside. And then eventually I was like, well, if we get a dog, it's not staying outside, first of all. So then it was like, oh, we can get a dog, but it's not coming in our bed. And then now that dog literally sleeps between me and Olivia, and then we'll just cuddle her all night. And she wouldn't have it any other way. But I know that Olivia has struggled with mental health throughout, basically her whole life. And I personally, and I don't know if she's seen this, but I have seen that from, getting gym that it really has helped her. Like, I don't know that she's put 2 and 2 together, but I mean, she's a much happier person and a much more, I don't know, connected person, I think, due to gym. And I think that, is just one example in my life of somebody that I've seen have a very positive impact from having an animal constantly around who can, know when she's feeling sad or anything like that. And he'll just get up. I mean, they have like a sixth sense. He'll just get up and start cuddling with her. And I mean, he's really special.
And look at his relationship with your daughter.
Oh, I mean, those two are inseparable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do think it's really special. So that was the book. That was the part of the book that I really liked. I did wish, though, that they had talked about Zeke later on.
I know that. I can tell you.
Yeah. So what all happens? Because he doesn't say anything. Basically, the race ends. He goes back to his farm. The people that he adopted the donkey come by, see that the donkey's doing so much better, and then the book ends. And I'm like, well, would have been nice to have known. Well, I guess he did mention a little bit. Zeke goes back to school and he gets a girlfriend, but that's all I know.
Yeah, I mean, I only know, all I know is that he is actually, although I didn't look at the date of when that interview was, but he was getting his PhD at Berkeley.
Oh,
and
wow.
Doing very, very well and very happy.
That's good.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So yeah, that would have been cool to maybe add an addendum or something to the book. So the other part that we kind of glanced over this real quick, and I want to glance over it one more time because I remembered something, was I really did like the Amish stuff. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that one of the quotes that kind of stuck with me from the Amish part was that he asked somebody in the Amish community why he was Amish, or, how he could live like that. And the Amish person just says, he watches other people race around to save time so that they can sit around and waste it. I felt like that was
Ouch.
So good. Because he was talking to this Amish person about, like, dude, you don't have cars. Like, you have horses and buggies, and you just go around and you churn your own butter. Like, everything's so much more instant and fast if you just embrace some of these changes. And the Amish person just says, you guys run around and save as much time as you guys can just so that you can waste it later.
Which I see. That's why I said, ouch, because I see that with myself. We all have everything at our fingertips, and yet we are busier than I was when I was a full-time mom with all the kids at home. And I'm almost 55, and I work, but I don't have 6 practices that I'm going to, a dinner that I have to fix, homework that I have to make sure is being done, begging my kids to read books that they should be reading for school. I have none of that going on. And yet I feel so much more busy and so much more anxious. And so I really think it's because everything is at my fingertips, that I spend half my day looking at stupid things at my fingertips that have absolutely no bearing on what my real life is.
Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce.
I am all for them. They're going to get married, but let's talk about the book. Your ratings just went up, by the way.
Yeah, just mentioning them. Yeah, so I mean, I definitely see that.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I'm always running around to go somewhere, and then, once I do something, I sit there and I scroll on Instagram, or I, waste time sitting on the couch, that, I don't know, that quote to me, like, really hit home about, like,
we never let our brain rest anymore.
No.
We don't.
And I've been really trying to do that and I do still struggle with it, and Olivia struggles with it, but we always kind of like remind each other, but just to kind of put everything away, put phones away, put it all down, and just spend time just kind of playing. And it does kind of almost hurt a little bit.
It does.
You're like, sit there, but our kid will come up and she'll be like, talk with me. And she'll bring 2 toys, and all she wants to do is have conversations with 2 toys. And I can do it for just a couple minutes. And then I'm like, man, this is so painful, which is so sad that, like, that's how we're wired, that we just need to be going and doing something else all the time.
And this is totally off topic, but not based on what the guy said. But I listened to a brain health podcast, and they said that's exactly what your brain needs. I mean, obviously it needs exercise, water, proper nutrition, but it needs to be turned off.
Slow it down, turned off.
Slow it down, yeah. And yeah, I don't. I actually would love to read a book about the Amish people. Maybe that could be our next book if I'm invited back on.
We'll see.
One of my favorite things that he said, and I don't know if it was in the book or in the interview. I know it was on the interview, but he said all these people came together once he got Sherman. The person who came to Tanya, who came to see Sherman and to help him clip his hair and all of that. And then Tanya's husband was the furrier who took care of his hooves. And then Zeke, he didn't know who Zeke was, and other people started helping them with the burro racing community, teaching them how to do things. The women who were at the last minute came in to take them to the race and things like that. And what he learned in that whole process, is, again, going back to, in the beginning, he always wanted to do something, made a plan, and went forward with it. With this one, the story just unfolded. Mm-hmm. And he said what he learned was when we ask for favors, we allow other people to shine. I love that.
Yeah.
I can just see how he's won some amazing races. He has a pretty impressive resume. But I feel like of all the things that he has done, this has changed him the most in here.
Well, this is probably the most different from running, even though it's still running, that he's ever done. Because running truly is, you do train with other people, but it really is a solo sport. Like, it's about how much, you can suffer, your pacing, your everything, monitoring your body, your rhythm, and everything like that. And so I can see how that would be kind of a new idea for him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he said the number one stress was not if they were going to make it to the race necessarily, or if they were going to win the race. That never even factored into their heads. But he actually said, was he getting more people in trouble with this idea?
Yeah.
Because, there was a lot of risk involved. The burro racing is pure insanity. I picked up the book. Bonnie said she loved the book. I went and got the book. I was so excited. I told your dad, I want a donkey. I'm going to run with it. I had my route planned where I live to run with my donkey. And Dad was like, well, donkeys are compassionate. They actually show a lot of emotion for their owners and things like that. And so it wasn't a hard no on it. Hard no is goat and cat. But donkey was maybe.
Really? No goats?
No goats.
I like goats.
Goats apparently eat everything.
Yeah, but then he doesn't have to mow the lawn.
He doesn't have to mow the lawn, but if you've ever watched a goat, they poop constantly. And it's like a little gumball machine. It's so gross. Like if you step on it, I'm assuming it's no big deal. But they are just constantly pooping and eating everything. So like all my furniture on my deck, gone. Yeah. Like everything would be gone. So anyways, goats, cats, hard no. Donkey, before I read this book, I was really like, this could be my thing. I'm always kind of looking for my stupid thing. What's going to be me? And I wanted to like amp up my running. And by, I don't know what chapter, but once I heard that you had to be tethered entirely to the donkey.
You were like, no.
And stubborn as a mule does not, that phrase comes by honestly, that it is not even a negotiation process with these animals. It is literally, it is literally a you hope and a prayer situation. I realized, there was no way that I could do it. And so knowing how hard it was, of a race. And now he had pulled in all these people. I mean, Zeke with some emotional issues, his wife, all these different people, different animals that belong to different people. And he's doing this thing to save Sherman.
Yeah.
It's kind of insane.
It is. I mean, it's a cool story.
Awesome.
It is a cool story. I will admit to that. Again, there were aspects that I felt like I still learned some stuff. Parts of the book that I really liked. I just maybe mostly had some structural things from the book. Not my favorite. I would agree.
I'm telling you, I thought he was ADD the whole time until the end.
So what animals are you guys going to get? Our kid is obsessed with animals. What animals are you going to get before we come back up to Alaska? Anything good? Are you guys going to have llamas finally or alpacas or anything?
Well, hopefully you're coming back next summer.
Yeah, we are coming back. Okay. That's what I mean. Yeah. That's the deadline. What are you guys going to have by?
Actually,
I want some fun animals.
Purchasing the animals is not the problem. It is building the shelter that is the problem. I think we still want llamas. I don't know that we'll get alpacas except to be companions to llamas, but llamas serve our purpose more. Does everybody know that we live in Alaska?
Yeah.
And so, we would like pack animals. At some point, your ancient parents, which I know you think it is today, will not be able to carry backpacks and things. And so it would be fun to have pack animals.
I swear growing up, I don't think Dad could carry a backpack either, because anytime I ever went hunting with him, the entire thing was on my back.
That is true.
So,
but I would say llamas, alpacas. I've tried to convince him of pigs, but he would want the pigs, and so I don't think we'll get those. Plus, our neighbors have a hard time with their pigs.
Rob and Leanne are going to get some animals this year, aren't they?
Yes, they are going to get goats, and they are going to get chickens. I mean, what else would you want? Actually, I might convince him for some sheep. Sheep are actually docile, and
you guys don't have that much land.
Well, we have 4 acres. That's quite a bit.
Yeah.
But I'm not getting a herd of sheep. No. I mean, I'm not going to all of a sudden.
Well, no. You guys can't. I don't know that you guys can get all of those animals. Like, you could do like llamas and sheep and alpacas, but I don't think you could get llamas, sheep, goat, or.
Well, I don't want goats.
Pigs.
Well, we could get pigs. We could have room for pigs. You'd be surprised, but we're not getting pigs. I don't want animals. It goes back to I can't watch a movie that.
You don't want animals that have to die?
Bingo. For those of you who don't know this, I have a chicken that lives in my garage. That chicken's life expectancy can be about 12 years.
Really?
Yeah.
How old is Stella Luna?
Stella is 2.5, and she will live to be 12. She is the one chicken that absolutely will not.
Yeah, I mean, she sits on your lap and you pet her and she follows you around. And
I swing her.
Yeah, she sits on the swing. Yeah, she sits on the front porch swing.
She does not go outside without me. I am so close to her because we've had, not wolves, but coyotes come after our free-range chickens before, even when Dad was out on a tractor and snag some of our chickens. So, so I only want animals that...
Well, he shot a coyote in there.
Can't.
Didn't he shoot a coyote or a lynx going after your chickens?
I don't know, no.
There's one of them.
Yeah, I don't know.
He shot it in the yard.
Yeah, I don't know.
Are you saying that because he wasn't supposed to?
No, I honestly don't know. So.
But yeah, so you guys do need some animals before we come up this next summer.
Yeah. We might have some.
Otherwise, we're just going to be living at Rob. We'll see you at the end of our trip. The beginning at the end of our trip and the end of our trip. If you could just pick us up at the airport and then drop us back off.
No, I'll have you get the shuttle.
Oh, my goodness. We'll just Uber on over. All right. Well, what would you rank this book on a scale of 1 to 5 for fun and 1 to 5 for importance?
Gosh, that is hard because I am a hard book critic.
Be as rough as you want to be.
I like that you broke it up.
Yeah, because some books are really fun,
Yeah.
but not important, and some books are really important but not very fun.
Yeah. I would say probably that's so hard. It's so hard because how do you put this book up against The Kite Runner or Holocaust books or other books like that? So hard. Or well-written, books.
Or books that are enjoyable.
No, because I liked it a lot. But there were some...
Okay.
It's a modern book. And it's a book by a phenomenal runner.
And a journalist.
So it's written different.
You can kind of feel the journalism through it.
100%. I think that's a very fair critique of it. It's not written like a novel by any means. It's just a fun book. So for maybe fun, I would say 3.54.
Okay. And then importance?
I think we hit on a lot of the important things. If I could pull out chapters of importance, although I also think that it was important. Another thing that we didn't touch on is that we can all do hard things. Mm-hmm. We can step outside of our comfort zone and just go for something.
Start a podcast.
Start a podcast. I think that's important. I think it keeps us happy. I think it keeps us healthy. I think it keeps us driven. I think it keeps us excited. And so I think that this book showed that. This was insanity, really. Aside from the fact that he was already a runner, but to do this in 9 months, in fact, one of the things he said was this wasn't his original quote, but someone once said, have a plan and not a lot of time. Because a lot of people plan things and then it takes them 6 years to get started on it.
Oh, yeah.
Or to get to the end product.
Yeah.
And so he's like, we had a plan. Sherman needed a job, and we had 9 months until the burro race. Mm-hmm. And so we had to be all in. And I think that that's a really cool concept.
I do too, as well. I think that's one of the, if I could pat myself on the back at all, I'm not successful in everything that I do, but I'm very good at just getting things done. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like the podcast is one good example of it. I'm not anywhere close to getting any sort of listeners or any traction yet, but I do it. You know what I mean? Like, I bought all the crap and I set up some things and I got people to read books with me. You know what I mean? And I think there is something to be said about just doing something. And
going all in.
Yeah. And I think that this book does illustrate that very well.
So I'm going to go back on what I said. I think that I'm going to give it a 4 on both counts. I think that I'm giving it a 4 on the fun. It's not the same scale as a classic. We already said that. It is not the same scale.
It is the same scale. The scale of 1 to 5.
But I thought you said I don't have to compare it to something like that. Okay, I'm going to say...
It doesn't have to be the same type of fun. But was it fun? Does that make sense? Like, there's different types of fun. My ski coach always used to say type 1 fun and type 2 fun. There's type 1 fun, which is, fun in the moment.
Yeah.
And, that's awesome. You're out, watching a movie with your buddies, eating candy. Like, that's type 1 fun. Type 2 fun is fun afterwards. He actually say there's 3 types of fun. There's type 1 fun, which is fun in the moment. Type 2 fun, which is fun afterwards. That's like running, and completely don't agree with that one, but like cross-country skiing, things that once you complete it, it was really fun. And then there's type 3 fun, which is no fun at all.
Yeah. I do love that saying. The problem is that I think that we hit on some really good points of the book. Was the book written great?
But was it fun?
It was fun. Okay, I'm giving it a 4 fun.
I didn't say it was. Was this
solid-
book a literary classic?
Okay, I'm giving it a 4 fun.
Okay.
What was the other one?
Importance.
That's the one I'm struggling with. Because I don't, again, to me, an important book to read is The Kite Runner. It changed me.
Okay.
It changed who I was.
So that's a 5.
I would say that.
Okay.
But I do think that Running with Sherman had some really strong points.
Okay, so
Super strong points.
Hence the purpose of a scale.
But I know, but I can't
so there's
even.
5
I don't even
there,
know that I could put
and then
it
there's
in
like
the same scale.
1 being just garbage.
It was not garbage.
Where on that scale would you put it?
Well, because I feel like if I put it at a 3, then I'm throwing out some of these: have a plan, not enough time, ask for favors, allow someone else to shine, animals and human relationships are important. Like, those are 3 really important nuggets from this book.
Yeah.
And those probably would actually change my life more than a lot of other books if I just even applied those.
So, what would you rate it?
But then I don't want to seem overzealous for the book and people think, really? What other books does she read?
There are like 3 people that listen to this podcast. 2 of them are Rob and Leanne. So I don't really think you have to be all too critical yet. Maybe one day when you come on the podcast and I have more than I can count on my hand, then we can get a little bit worried about how you're ranking books and wait for the internet Nazis to come and knock down your door for ranking this book wrong. Okay. However, right now you can rate it whatever you want because no one's listening.
Importance, I will say, because importance is a big word. I'm going to say.
This is painful.
I'm going to say
you're not going to be invited
3.5.
back if you can't answer the questions.
3.5.
Okay, 3.5. Okay, so I would give it a 2 for fun and a 3 for importance. I do think it was more important than it was fun.
Because you're not a runner.
Because I'm not a runner.
And your mind was already closed before you even opened the book.
And I had a hard time following the book. It might have to do with the fact that I'm just not very bright. And that's okay. I admit that on a lot of books.
It was hard to follow.
But I did have a hard time following it. And
agree.
there were parts of the book that I felt like were left out. So that's why I give it a 2.
I agree.
So, but it's definitely not a 1. Like, I don't regret reading it. That would be a 1 for me. A 1 would be, I wish I had never read it. But it is definitely one that I don't recommend to people. You know what I mean? So it's a 2. But it was a 3 for importance. I do think that you could learn a lot from it.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. I think there are definitely important aspects to the book that can be life-changing depending on your circumstances in life. So,
I think that's fair. I think I can sleep at night with that analysis. Good job.
Thank you. That's all I wanted was your approval. So how was your first episode of the podcast? Are you going to finish the other books so that we can do another one? Or are you like, well, I don't know that I want to get back on?
I might read Cliff Notes. That's what you did your whole life.
You're not allowed on if you don't finish the book.
Oh, they should have said that to you. Like, you're not allowed to graduate from high school if you don't finish a book. You're not allowed to graduate from college if you don't finish a book.
Both of those, high school, they will let you graduate as long as you show up and have a pulse nowadays. Mm-hmm. In college, they'll let you graduate as long as you give them enough money. Both of those wastes of time, in my opinion.
Well, I will finish the book, and I will give you my opinion on that one.
Okay, sounds good. Well, for everybody who is still listening to the podcast, please make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe to the podcast. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a 5-star review. And we are still looking for 2 things. We are looking for guests. So if you want to read a book with me, please reach out. You can reach out on Instagram really just Instagram, or leave a comment on YouTube and let me know if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast. I've got a list of books that we can go from, or if you have any book recommendations, I'd love to read that with you. And then we're also looking for listeners. So if you know any...
Surprise.
Yeah. So if you have any friends or anybody who likes to read, if you are part of a book club and you're looking for new books and you want to just, have some people listen to some of the episodes of the podcast, just tell your friends, family. would love to grow our base a little bit so we can grow. I don't know why I want to grow the base, but that'd be fun. Thanks for listening.